for joining Book Drive, presented by Dandelion Breeze Audio, planting seed while you read. A Fallen Whispers trademark and copyright 2003 by Kimberly. Short story, copyright August 7th, 2022 by Kimberly. Story title, A Day in the Hot, Hot Sun. Wilbur Worm scrunched about the moist, soft dirt, leaving trails of zigzag lines when he came upon a hardened surface he was unfamiliar with. It had a slightly rough texture and a little gritty, sandy feeling. As Wilbur inched upon the surface more and more, his tail lingering still upon the moist, soft dirt, causing him to feel safe, he felt the warmth that capsulated his long, sleek body, and for a moment it felt really, really nice. But as time passed, and the sun beamed down on this sandy, gritty, solid surface, Wilbur found he could not move as easily as he first had when sliding upon the top of the hard surface, and he was beginning to dry out. Normally, Wilbur Worm keeps a moist, kinda slimy feel on his outer body, but just now he was feeling a little crusty and brittle. Oh, how he hoped one of his friends would come by to help him get back upon the moist, soft dirt. As Wilbur was growing dizzy from the sun's heat, he thought he saw little fluttering wings. Could it be Lilybug, the ladybug neighbor? Even if it were Lilybug, how could she help? She had no means to lift Wilbur Worm to move him. As Wilbur dozed in and out of conscious dizziness, he dreamed of scrunching through the underground dirt, making trails and resting in the cool of the dirt, only to once in a while peek out a wormhole to see the sunshine. He was always in awe of the sunshine. That's what got him into trouble today. This brought him back to remember where he was, on a now hot, gritty, sandy, rough, hard surface, and his body stretched to his fullest length. He could not seem to get back to the moist ground. Then things became pale and black again, as his ears then perceived the tug on the tip of one end of him, not fully realizing Grassy Green, the grasshopper, was trying to jump, flutter, and fly to carry Wilbur Worm from the hot, hard, solid surface, knowing Wilbur Worm would dry out under the hot sun, and that would cause Wilbur to no longer be able to inch his way to safety away from the hot, hot sun rays. Grassy Green had no success at moving Wilbur Worm, for his length had stretched so long that his weight was too much. Though he were drying out fast, he was getting stuck in this spot where he could not move. Night time was coming, and Lilybug and Grassy Green wondered if Wilbur would gain back his consciousness, that they could speak with him and ask, "What is it we can do to help you, Wilbur?" But Wilbur stayed silent. Night was now dark, and Lightning Lou flew by, casting his flickering light about that caused a glare in Grassy Green and Lilybug's eyes. Excitement exuded within each one of them as they called to Lightning Lou for his help. Making a wide flight turn when he heard their voices, he lit up like a green Christmas bulb and slowly faded to a soft green glow as he listened to Grassy Green and Lilybug tell of the harm Wilbur Worm had succumbed to. As all three thought together how they could help Wilbur, they heard some scratchy, crunchy noise in the direction where Wilbur lay. Hurriedly, Lightning Lou flew to see what they all had heard, and Grassy Green hopped and flittered to a near open field where Lightning Lou's friends and relatives were sparkling up the night sky, and once he arrived atop the highest blade of grass and a flower stem, he sputtered out, "Louie!" That is Lightning Lou's nickname. "Louie needs you all to help light up the sky over yonder where he is fluttering about, marking the spot where Wilbur Worm lay. Unmoving, and rarely a sound was heard from him." So all Louie's friends and relatives came shining bright their little flittering green lights, and there they could see Wilbur Worm just laying stuck to this hard surface, which, by the way, is called concrete. And there they could see movement, but it wasn't Wilbur Worm moving, but a whole trail of ants. It was as though they were in military unison marching along, each side of Wilbur Worm. Then they would all stop, turn about face toward Wilbur, and then all the ants would squeeze in a little tighter, getting closer together to one another, standing side by side. Lilybug watched in amazement and curiosity of what were these ants doing. Were they going to harm Wilbur Worm while he was in distress? Grassy Green had finally hopped and flittered his way back to where Wilbur lay, and where all Louie's friends and relatives were at, and when he seen the ants, he immediately ordered them to state their business surrounding Wilbur that way, for he too did not want the ants to further cause any additional pain to Wilbur's already distressed state of being. The ant leader stepped out of the military-like line and ordered all the ants to be at ease, but to stay in formation, for the ants had a task to do, and breaching formation would only cause Wilbur further distress, and may even cause his inevitable death if something wasn't done, and done quickly. The ant leader spoke in a Morse code-type chitter-chatter that took a great deal of concentration and quiet listening to hear what the ant was translating to Grassy Green. Once the ant finished speaking, it was clear they were there to help Wilbur, not to hurt him. The ant leader ordered Grassy Green down upon the solid hard surface at one tail end of Wilbur, for the ants needed help moving Wilbur, and since he was somewhat stuck to the hard surface, they were going to lift him and lay his tail end upon Grassy Green's back, while the other ants continued to loosen Wilbur from the surface. Louis and his friends and relatives continued to flutter in the night sky, creating light for all to see. Lilybug was ordered to prepare a soft, moist dirt spot, where once the ants had Wilbur loosened from the hard surface, they could carry him to his natural habitat, and prayerfully they had hoped he'd regain his strength, and that the ground's moisture could make soft his form again, to be able to scrunch along as was his usual nature and way. This task took most of the night, and the sun was beginning to rise as the ants hurried. Lilybug worried out loud. "Oh, we've got to get Wilbur free, for if today's rising sun sets on him again, he's a goner for sure. We'll never get him to his soft ground to hydrate him moist again." When at last, through the considerable effort and perseverance, the ants had Wilbur free of the hard concrete surface, Grassy Green began a slight flutter, hop, as the ants carried Wilbur to the soft ground spot Lilybug had prepared. And it so happened that it was in the shade of a large sycamore tree, because it so happens that the sun is now in full rise. Grassy Green and Lilybug thanked Lightning Lou and his friends and relatives. They thanked each single ant, which were many, many, and many more. Then they waited and continued to wait, through the hot sun keeping shaded Wilbur Worm. They done this by Grassy Green would flick up to the top of a large blade of grass or flower bloom. Then he'd sway on its side to side till he got it resting over where Wilbur lay, and this would give shade like an umbrella. Lilybug would sometimes have to sit and cling to Grassy Green's leg or foot to get the sway just right to hold the shade in place. Finally, the sun was beginning to set, and shade was no longer needed of the flowers and grass blades, and Grassy Green and Lilybug still waited. All day they had waited and shaded and fluttered and flittered about to keep cool Wilbur Worm. As their eyes were growing faint with sleep, Wilbur began to stir. First one tip of his end would twitch, then the other end of his tip would twitch, till finally he was able to scrunch his whole length, and he had movement again. It wasn't until he scrunched and touched the tips of Grassy Green's toe and Lilybug's foot that both simultaneously awoke wide-eyed to see their friend Wilbur Worm up and moving. They both instantly fluttered wings of joy as they inched along with Wilbur Worm to his next destination, being sure to keep Wilbur away from the hard, hot surface of the gritty, sandy concrete. As they all three scrunched and fluttered about in the night's darkness, a sudden light flittered in front of them, and it was headed their way. It was Lightning Lou, and beyond him was all his friends and family, coming to see how Wilbur was doing. And once everyone gathered together to sing praises of joy and wonder of how the blessings of God's love befalls to each and every one of us. They realized the ants were there too, because of the flickering lights of all Louie's friends and relatives. For you see, ants are dark in color, and you cannot see them in the night, for they are very, very quiet. Unless, of course, when they are eating and munching on crisp green leaves and grass blades. There being so many ants, you could hear their eating like 100 little nibbles all at once. Crunch, munch, crunch. and everyone celebrated Wilbur Worm's recovery from a day in the hot, hot sun. The end. See you next time on Book Drive, a Dandelion Breeze audio presentation, planting seed while you read.